Welcome to Clever Orbits, your favorite Star Trek podcast. Today, we have the usual crew, Richard Futrell, myself, Louis Brandmeier, Tyler Brandmeier, and in a stunning move, a foremost author in the field of esotericism and researcher in social psychology, as well as an orthodontics teacher, Dr. Richard Kaczynski. Did I get it right?
Kaczynski.
That was so close. Good to have you on, brother.
Oh, good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. So today we are talking about an episode that is right up your alley, the Magicks of Magicks 2, and we're just going to jump right in. I have always loved this episode. I've been very entertained by everything from the shaman battle near the end, which you don't usually see in Star Trek, to a lot of the things that probably aren't supposed to be so prominent or entertaining, like the animators suddenly changing the color of McCoy's shirt about 14 minutes in. And, this episode was entertaining. It's got some classic Trek, themes, like if we just show compassion to other life forms, we can even change the way that aliens treat each other. Which is kind of course, the metonymy or metaphor for if we treat all beings with respect, hopefully, they will begin to treat us and their comrades with respect. And that was about as Trek as I got into it. There wasn't much I found to grasp onto and chew on philosophically, but I'm sure between two Richards, we should be able to come up with something. Yeah, that as short as it was, surprise, was my opening salvo. Actually, I rather like calling you Doc. Do you mind if I call you Doc?
Feel free.
All right, Doc. So what did you like or think about or notice in this episode?
Oh, several things. What I liked, I was really amused and entertained by seeing Spock drawing a pentagram on the floor of the Enterprise and standing in it, to do magic. I mean, just that was just the coolest thing. And Spock's like, well, this isn't logical, but then in this world where we're in, where this other dimension where the rules are different, it was logical for him to pursue that. And just the idea of Spock drawing a pentagram amused me. But also just kind of coming at this as, a biographer of Aleister Crowley. A couple things that jumped out at me were that in the title of the episode, The Magicks of Magicks 2, they spell magic with a K, which was Crowley's innovation, reintroducing that particular spelling to distinguish his occult magic from sleight of hand and stage magic. But also in the title, you've got the name of this planet, Magicks 2. And I can't, again, this is perhaps me with my Crowley brain here, Crowley biographer brain, but, one of Crowley's magical mottos in Greek was To Mega Therion, and I always wonder if Magicks 2 was To Mega, and if there was some inspiration there behind the naming of that planet. And then, the fact that the denizens of this planet, you've got, the character Lucian, who we find out at the end of the episode is actually Lucifer, but the Cotton Mather sort of inquisitor character is also named Asmodeus, who's another demon. So you've definitely got a lot of this, occult magic-y grimoire demonology sort of stuff kind of woven into it, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Of course. Well, did you make anything from the, maybe have your own sort of backstory for the origins or the reason why the planet had that name? Like maybe these are all those who've reached that degree of initiation or something?
I don't really have a story or a theory, but I remember when we see the entities who live on Megas 2, they're in these robes with these hoods over their faces, and that's again, if you've seen any examples of Crowley's robes in his order AA, they have a very similar look. Now, I very much doubt that the animators were modeling the look after Crowley's AA robes, but the parallel is kind of amusing to me to see. So yeah, you may be onto something there.
And then when it comes to the like general themes and what happens in the episode, what was your take?
Well, I mean, I thought the hearkening back to the Salem witch trials was appropriate, given the kind of magic-y theme and this idea of putting humanity on trial, which we've certainly seen in other Star Trek series, like the finale to Next Generation. But also just this idea that at the end, that Kirk is defending Lucifer, and it's like, well, it doesn't matter who he is. The point is that we have we have ideals that we live by, and these ideals apply to everyone or nobody at all. And I don't know, that was just kind of I thought was a very interesting take. Certainly one that winds up winning over the respect of the other denizens of Megas too.
Yeah, you're right. I hadn't put that together with, say, the trial of Q or some of the other trials that we've seen, but it is a kind of repeated theme throughout the whole of Star Trek, this whole notion that humanity needs to be put on trial and asked whether or not it has a right to live or explore the cosmos.
Or even like the measure of a man,
Oh yeah, totally. I just rewatched that. What is your nature, and is it good, or do you deserve respect as person? Yeah, that's a really great point. Like, making that comparison, what I see is how, from our perspective, we believe ourselves to be kind of the apex, right, of the evolution of this planet in the ecosystem that we inhabit. And assuredly, or ostensibly, any alien species existing without contact to another alien species would probably think themselves the same, like they are the apex, and they kind of get to be the judge or the arbiter. And when we encounter them, we're just going to have to get judged. We're going to have to find some way to meet their judgment. And it's interesting to have humanity judged by other people's standards. It's an interesting place to go. Both.
Yeah, that does seem to be a theme. That shows up in a lot of Star Trek episodes. Regardless of whether there's trials or not, but just aliens thinking, well, you're too violent, for us to tolerate your existence, or that just seems to be something that turns up in a lot of these stories, that aliens just don't like us because we seem to be too primitive.
Yeah, one of the things we've sort of, at the risk of punning, orbited in the past on the show is this question of ethics that work internationally and then intergalactically. And there's a certain level at which we need to be ethical because it works. Like pragmatically, it serves our survival and our peaceable living with other species. And what that would consist of and what that would look like, I think, is the kind of thing that would fall out of these questions of basically, like this other species has its aims, its desires, and its judgments and opinions about us, and like how do we live or act or engage with what we're up to in the universe in such a way that other species don't just smash us like a Cthulhu would, or judge us to be worthy of ceasing to exist at the beginning of our existence, like Q has. And I just think it's an interesting question. I stand in a world where, or I envision a world where we, and you see this in politics, where if you can give a group a common enemy, they will band together, and this has been utilized throughout history. And so I like to think that we would band together to meet aliens or to meet a species or culture that's as dramatically different than ours as the Vulcans are from the humans in First Contact. However, we have also seen portrayals of that situation playing out very differently. The Arrival being one where there is sort of a banding together, but also a little bit of conflict that needs to be gotten through. And so, yeah, what part could could aliens play in the development of our species such that we become more humane? Ironically enough, we become more humane through interacting with something that isn't us. And I think actually that's kind of one of the themes that's pointed to here is that, the Salem witch trials and then the suffering of people in ways like those trials have inflicted, fed into the development of this idea of who we should be. And Kirk, I like his kind of shifty-eyed, when he's creeping towards his statement that, I'd like to think we are a little better. I mean, it's not even one of these grandiose Picardian sorts of we are noble now. We are past all of these terrible things. No, he's just kind of well, maybe, I think, which also plays to a perception we've developed that 22nd century, basically us in space. 23rd, yeah, we're kind of developed. 24th, yes, we are straight up Star Trek, so much so to the point where Picard in First Contact, he doesn't even recognize revenge as an impulse that he could be acting upon because it doesn't exist in his culture except as a historical curiosity. It's not something that he looks at as a real potential behavior for him until someone from the 21st century, namely Lily, points it out to him, and then he's like, whoa, okay, I have regressed to earlier human nature somehow. So anyway, yeah.
Well, I guess that kind of circles back
go ahead,
to.
Please.
I guess that kind of circles back to the episode because the way Kirk, of Vegas 2 is that the way Kirk finally winds up, saving Lucian is he tells Asmodeus that if he does this, that he's no better than the humans in 1691. And that's the thing they go, whoa, we're regressing here. And so, don't be like the old humans, be be better. So in a way it's kind of it's distancing ourselves from, distancing humanity from its sort of checkered past, but also challenging, the other race to not be like us and be, and also embrace, their better nature.
Don't do as we've done. Do as we're doing.
Right.
Speaking of Asmodeus, who I will never forget or cease to enjoy the moment when he kind of looks at the camera and says, "They burn for it. Burn!" It's a little over the top. But I'm curious what. I surely I could have done some more research, but I figured we've got a premier researcher coming on that I can ask this question to. What did Asmodeus do? What is his history, and what does the meaning of having him show up specifically, along with Lucifer, connote to you, who's studied all of, maybe not all of demonology, but knows certainly more than we do?
Yeah. Well, there's. The medieval grimoires, or basically magic cookbooks, or how-to manuals. The most famous of which is the Goetia, or the Lesser Key of Solomon, and it contains the name of 72 demons that dukes and emperors and kings, and this kind of infernal hierarchy, and they all have things that they are better at. So if you want, a pox on your neighbor's cow, you'd call one person, but if you want to find a missing book, you'd call somebody else. And so all these demons have particular things they're good at. And Asmodeus is, at least in that context, one of a whole number, and probably one of the better known names. I mean, I couldn't tell you what his properties or how many legions he commands or anything like that according to regulation. I'd have to look it up, but certainly when you think of names of infernal beings, Mephistopheles and Asmodeus and people like that. I mean, Asmodeus is one of the better known names, so it's kind of a fairly obvious go-to name if you're looking for some sort of infernal demon. Well, Baal might, maybe Baal is a little too close, and it sounds too much like the Eyes of Baal, so we'll avoid that. But Asmodeus, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm hearing that the writers probably knew just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to really quite know with precision what they were doing in writing this episode, maybe.
Yeah, and reading some of the background of it, one of the things that I found was kind of interesting is that the fellow who pitched the story, Larry Brady, had originally pitched this as a season 3 episode, but then of course season 3 never happened. And then when season 3 happened, but anyway, he had pitched this as an episode. It was never picked up. And then he pitched it again for the animated series. But in that original pitch, the Enterprise actually goes to the center of the galaxy and encounters God. But apparently the NBC censors wouldn't allow them to actually meet God. So they figured, okay, but they would allow them to meet the devil. So they wound up kind of tweaking the story around that. So it's, I thought that was kind of interesting that you can't have them meet God, but you can have them meeting the devil. That's okay. Only to have them meet God, in Star Trek V, a number of decades later. So irony.
Yeah, it's almost more dangerous for the portrayal of the thing to which we should all give adherence and the ordering principle of society that we experience through religion and venerate and kneel to. Like, if there's a portrayal of him on Star Trek that undignifies him and makes people begin to question that maybe he's just an alien, well, then that's uncomfortable. But if it's just the fact that maybe Satan is an alien, well, that's actually possible. We'll go with that. It's kind of what I'm imagining the conversation went like.
Yeah. Apparently they got some hate mail or unhappy mail for portraying the devil in the episode, and their response was kind of like, well, but if the devil exists, then that means we're also affirming that God exists. So that's cool, right?
Yeah, we just won't mention that he might be an alien too. So yeah, that's great. That's super awesome so far. My Jones, that we're calling him, probably has been waiting. Oh, okay. Well, then there we go. Doc and Richard, which Richard's also a Doc, but we won't call him Doc. And by now we've profoundly confused every listener. Right. No, this is fine. Mr. Futrell, Mr. Dr. Futrell, please. What were your thoughts? What did you get from all this?
Well, I'm fascinated by the idea that this episode might have all kinds of covert Thelema, Aleister Crowley-related imagery. I went and looked up the writer, and he doesn't appear to have any obvious connections to such things, but it's definitely not outside the realm of possibility. For writers in LA in the 70s, seems like there's a definite interesting connection there, and it's certainly not a crossover that I would have expected. So thanks for pointing that out, Richard. I think
and I don't know the answer, but it's certainly interesting.
It seems like a very good hypothesis. I think it seems likely. I feel first thing to know about this episode is I haven't seen a lot of the animated series, but for some reason I've seen this episode over and over again. So I think that probably tells you something. It might be, maybe it's the best one in the animated series. But, you just got to kind of filter it through your expectations based on 1970s cartoons and the fact that they only had one animation cell for Lucien, and there's got the one where he raises his arms up, and then sometimes they go to the second stage where he moves his arm forward, but sometimes they just do the first stage.
Yeah, apparently they only had a very, very small budget or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm actually quite surprised that this was pitched for the actual show, considering that they could barely do it on a budget with cartoons. It's interesting to imagine how they would have done that IRL.
Yeah, actually, apparently, this is something that Roddenberry wanted to pursue. I mean, this idea of Star Trek encountering someplace where magic works. And, they had previously done that with the episode Cat's Paw. But, you had gone to kind of go a little bit deeper, but apparently they didn't have, the budget or special effects to do it justice in live action. But he felt that in animation, they could have swirly colors and exciting stuff to sell it better.
I rather like the animations for this. I mean, the special effects, quote unquote, were pretty good. So that was a thing.
So, I feel like my impression of this episode mostly comes from, I feel like there were quite a few lines in it, lines of dialogue that were sort of mysterious, and they sort of provide entry points into some sort of deeper things going on. And so I think it's very well written from that perspective. I just got a list here of lines that I thought were good springboards. So you got at the very beginning, when they're going into this thing in the center of the galaxy, and Bones comes on the bridge to be like, my God, man, what's going on? Spock says, we're at the center, possibly the center of everything, which is pretty cool. And it's pretty cool coming from Spock. So, Spock's been built up to be this extra logical, very cool-headed guy. So when Spock says we're going into the center of everything, then you know that some, very serious stuff's going on. And then that makes you think, okay, so they say that maybe the galaxy was formed in a giant explosion and matter is being formed at the center of the galaxy. Okay, maybe that's the cosmology we're going to come to in the 23rd century. But how would that be the center of everything? It's just the center of this galaxy, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think it actually works perfectly well because, when you go to the center of the galaxy, they exit normal space and time. So I think what's going on there is that, when you have conditions of extreme concentrations of matter and energy and, general relativity, you can get singularities where traditional notions of space and time just sort of stop making sense. In fact, you can get notions where, space and time actually reverse places. And so I figure what's going on here is that inside this area of extreme energy, actually all those areas of extreme energy at the center of all the galaxies are in some sense the same place, right? Because actually space itself has been distorted. Actually distance and locality don't matter anymore in this place, and that's the sense in which it's the center of everything. So that was a cool line.
That's great. Always coming in with the imaginative and intellectually robust redemption of things that initially occur for me as just complete BS that don't make any sense.
Yeah, so another line that I thought was a cool springboard was when they first go to the planet Megas 2, when they're in that sort of hazy red place, they see each other as these weird sort of scary clouds of energy or something. And they're disturbed. And Lucien says, "I've forgotten how much bodily integrity means to you humans." And that made me think of how, so we previously did our previous episode about this comic book, Star Trek, IDIC, Infinite Diversity and Infinite Combinations, which involved traveling into different multiverses. One of which was one in which everyone on the Enterprise was actually a cloud of gas. And so I guess if gaseous Enterprise people made it into this planet, they wouldn't really be so worried about their bodily integrity. But it also made me wonder, why is it that these energy magical beings don't care about bodily integrity, whereas humans do? So, what does it mean? What is actually going on in the center of the galaxy? What are these creatures? I think the key thing is that for these creatures, what magic means for them is that their beliefs and their desires are translated immediately into the physical reality around them, regardless of where they are. So the position of their body doesn't matter. If they believe something, they can cause an effect immediately at a distance. And this contrasts with us humans in our bodies. We can control our bodies. If I want to move my hand, I can, and it's kind of like magic. It's kind of like I have magic that's restricted within the domain of my body. I can't apply that. I can't apply my will and my belief outside of my body in the same way. So for these aliens, they're unlimited in their ability to apply their will to change things in the world, and so the idea of a body actually doesn't make sense for them anymore. A body is the thing that, what is it that distinguishes my body from the rest of the world? My body is the thing that I can control directly. The rest of the world I can only control indirectly. for these creatures, there's no such distinction, and that's also why notions of locality and space and time don't make sense for them to go out the window. And it's this, I think, there's this really cool idea that, like, the idea that matter is actually being generated here. Like, this thing is actually the center of everything in the universe. It's actually this, like, boiling pot out of which everything is coming out of. And I guess the idea is that, like, you've got multiple creatures that have this magical ability, and they're sort of contending with each other, or I don't really know what they're doing. So the guy, Lucian, mentions that in this world, every woman is as beautiful as she wants to be. And so to ensnare men, she needs an edge. And that implies there's some competition among these creatures, and somehow out of this energetic competition emerges our universe as a sort of byproduct. Our universe of matter where, you know, things are limited emerges out of this realm of things where things are unlimited. That's pretty much what I got. I thought there was a lot of cool ideas latent in this episode.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So one of the questions I would approach this episode with is like, okay, we'll see. In complete perpendicularity and contradistinction to all of our previous podcasts, the fact that this is not traditional canon, or the fact that this is questionable, the extent to which it fits into canon, just left me with the feeling of, oh, you know what? I don't have to justify any of this. This is like an alternate universe where Star Trek operates in a really crazy way that doesn't make any sense relative to the rest of the canon. So there was a kind of laziness that creeped in for me. But, yeah, I totally see and agree with you on the ways in which this could have fit and this can fit. I don't think that there's that much need to really argue about what's canon and what's not. I mean, we take CBS to be the Council of Nicaea on this, so to speak. CBS and Paramount, I guess. And yeah, so can we talk about the hilarious, kind of insane moments on this thing? Tyler, let's go to you.
Okay, what about that moment when there was sort of a wavy superimposition of a bunch of different faces that are meant to represent creatures that we've taken to be magical over the years?
Oh, you mean the demon?
And then Sula's,
played by, yes.
Excuse me, George Takei's really silly voice, initially portraying, I believe, the whole of the Megans. I'm not sure. Some entity that represents the entire Megan civilization. But that was pretty crazy. The body dysmorphic kind of animation that Kirk experiences. That's funny. James Doohan voicing Lucian. That's great. I love that.
Again, with the small budget.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to be one of our non-regulars as well, James? Yes, sure. I need a voice acting credit. But go ahead, sorry.
No, it's perfect. Pretty much everyone got to play two roles. Well, a couple of people got to play two roles. And that's always fun to be able to shift and demonstrate flexibility like that. But, yeah, what else was there? Basically, every moment that involves them crossing into the Megan's plane of existence. Oh, the fact that they live on a giant red watermelon. That was pretty, it was quite a sight to behold. And then, I don't know, pretty much anything Lucian does. Sort of, the gee whiz factor is cranked up to 11 with the way he's portrayed. And then there's, how do you pronounce his name again? The demon who puts,
Asmodeus?
Asmodeus, yeah. Yeah, we've seen him before. We've seen someone like him before. But from our perspective, yes, it was Q. But from everyone else's, this was the mid-'70s when the animated series was being produced. So this was sort of a taste of that particular argument against humanity. What else was there? There were a number of insane moments, at least visually.
Well, so there were, and I'll just take some of the reins from you on this because you'll remember when I mentioned, like, Spock has some really strange faces throughout this episode. Like there's one where he's very clearly pained. He's like in pain when he's got to take the helm, and then Kirk and Spock, like, so I understand having random alcoholic drinks appear in your hands. Like that's yes, something to be like surprised at. But they looked almost scared when they looked down and saw drinks. And I was just like, what? What? That's not, what? So,
what are you trying to roofie us for?
Yeah, I guess maybe they were concerned about what they saw in the drink. Yeah, I that could be true. And then,
what about?
Come on, did you see that Sulu manifests a woman?
Oh yeah,
of course. Yeah, and Lucien seems to almost admonish him.
I mean, since George Takei's coming out, Uhura's line, "Good luck," takes on a whole new meaning. So I'm sure you'll figure everything out.
It's a good moment.
Yeah. I did kind of like the way that Lucien steps in and stops him. Like, what do you think you're doing? And back to Spock and Magic. I thought his Vulcan chess stuff looked pretty cool, and I felt like his conclusions about the nature of the universe were tenuous at best. Like I was initially in my notes wanting to fall down on the side of well, he's just he's doing science, but he's wrong, rather than having him aligned with something that didn't make sense to me. But what did make sense, and makes about as much sense as scientific illuminism does, is him doing the experiment, no matter what universe, right? I have a belief that we are, and I have experiences with, a capacity to influence at least a part of our mind, behavior, and perception that might not be readily accessible or observable all the time, through really strange means, like speaking certain words and playing with certain symbols. And from shifts in my own behavior to what appear to be shifts in the external world, that are, okay, correlation is not causation, but the things that happen, they just seem too improbable, and or maybe that's a judgment better left to statisticians and legitimately trained scientists. But in my experience, it just seems like, what? How could that have happened? And as I've practiced some of the techniques of largely the law of attraction as inflected by Kevin Trudeau and Your Wish is Your Command and Abraham Hicks and the so-called channeled documents like Ask and It Is Given, I've seen things that seem to validate or fit into that viewpoint. What it means about the world at large, I don't like to make statements like that. I just like to say doing things seem to make certain things happen. And so the fact that Spock would be willing to do a certain type of experiment, especially despite the ridicule of his crewmates, that I applaud, and that seems classically Spockian and Trekkian in all the coolest of ways. Now, the fact that Kirk is able to, suddenly have all of these powers so well expressed by the end of the episode with what appears to be not as much training, that was a little more okay, well, maybe he did some research behind the scenes. Maybe there's a scene missing where Kirk, studied up on all of occult ceremonial magic and focusing the powers of the mind, and figured out for himself the magic that to quote Spock. Maybe there was I like to believe there's a deleted scene from the context of this episode where Spock and Kirk, realizing that magic works and realizing that they need it for their advantage, begin to study it in a serious way and give themselves a crash course for 6 hours to a day. And anyway, I can already hear Doc itching probably to say some things about this. Does this fit your picture of scientific illuminism to start?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, I guess I'm wondering, much like you, about missing scenes, and this obviously was a story that was originally pitched for an hour-long live action series, and so one wonders of some of these questions and rough edges that other reviewers have complained about would have been fleshed out and smoothed over better if they had the full hour format to tell the story. But it is what it is, and I think the idea of Spock doing the experiment, whether he believes in magic or not, but being able to say, well, let's try this and see what happens, is very much in the spirit of scientific illuminism. And because that's, Crowley, when he talks about magic, he really makes it clear that he's saying, here, I'm being very open and very transparent about things that I have done and the results that I've obtained. But what works for me may not work for you. And so what you need to do is kind of go through your own experiments and engage in the sort of critical evaluation of your work and what does and doesn't work, and find those things that work for you. And the idea is that, a single success is not the marker of what works. It's kind of building up this body of evidence, of being able to replicate success, and I guess this kind of circles back to what you were saying earlier about things, that you've experienced being rather unlikely, and since my day job is a statistician and my degree is in psychology, there actually there have been studies that show that we as human beings tend to exaggerate the unpredictability of events. We tend to see events as being rarer than they are, and we're also beings whose survival, depends on finding patterns. The idea of, if you go back to our evolutionary past, the idea of, Grok ate that thing and then he died 2 hours later, that thing might have killed Grok. It's a survival thing to be able to look for patterns. But if you find a pattern and then it repeats, and again, you said this as well, that there have been enough of these things over the course of your lifetime that you're convinced that there's something to it. It's not just this one-off sort of thing, but that you've got this body of evidence that compels you to think that there's more to it. And that's kind of what Crowley is suggesting, that everyone keep a journal where they can kind of go back and evaluate their work and their results and find this body of evidence that supports what works for them.
I really love that. I really love your articulation of it, and with the unique specificity, like such that by one perspective, magic, so-called, works, within the scope of one's particular mind and body and maybe even nervous system. And so this emphasis on keep your own journal and do your own experiments, like certain magic might only work for certain minds or certain mind-body combinations. So it is well within someone's right, even if magic is apparently, throughout the universe, as Spock has, for them to do unique experiments to see if their system can produce the same results. So, yeah, I like kind of dancing on this line between talking about actual magic and talking about Star Trek. So, let's see, what else was there here? A specialist in the ethics. Go ahead.
I think it's pretty amazing that we talked about how Spock moved the chess piece, or Kirk can shoot power out of his hands, but the fact that Sue actually created another living being, that's pretty remarkable.
Oh yeah, you're talking about in terms of the intensity and the difficulty of actual exercise of magical practice, so to speak, like creating an egregore, or actually, it wasn't even an egregore. It was like a person equivalent to anybody else on the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, no wonder Lucian was freaked out. It's what are you doing?
They can hear you. They can feel you. I also liked this idea of there's a certain intensity of they can feel your magic going on. Like, you should stop this because they can detect you. Like the exercise of magic being a certain, I don't know, thing that can be detected, much like radiation or something. That was interesting to me. And then, what was it? So there's a lot of stuff about this being an animated show that make it interesting. So this is the first time we've actually discussed an animated series episode, and you get everything from the three-armed RX, which I really like. I guess playing, doing the function on the bridge that Chekhov usually does, which is great to have him on the bridge, because later on he has such a face when one of the crew members disappears. Like, he's got such a face of surprise that I really enjoyed. And then it does, like Richard Futrell was talking about, give Star Trek a larger realm to play with, given that it doesn't require the same budgetary limitations. And we were actually discussing this with Mike Johnson about comics last week. He was talking about, we're so grateful that we were able to execute this story, because where else are you going to be able to have a plant Kirk or a gaseous Scotty show up? And so my questions then about this medium and about this format, especially given, which you guys may or may not know this, especially given that the creator of Rick and Morty is creating a half-hour-long Star Trek animated series called Star Trek Lower Decks, focused on comedy dealing with the least significant members of Starfleet. Especially given that, I can't wait for that. I'm curious what our thoughts are on things like the opening sequence and the theme song and the repetition of music, and it often on this show feels like James Doohan is playing everyone who isn't Scotty or the main crew. And so my judgments so far are that I think it was trying to play to Saturday morning cartoon audience. I'd have to do some research to find out when it was actually playing. I believe that was when it was. And, it was successful enough to go for 2 seasons. And then there's the opening sequence. Okay, so the motions of that ship across the screen are to me truly bizarre. Those are not the way that the ship usually moves. And I got it. You're trying to portray it's in motion in a really fun way. And I was kind of disappointed at the new theme song. The unique virtue that this show has that every other Star Trek doesn't is that when I was growing up, I would either watch this on a VHS tape that was pre-recorded by my aunt from late 1990s Sci-Fi Channel, or I would get it from Major Video. Gasp! That was the younger brother of Blockbuster Video that also no longer really exists. And, having new Star Trek that I hadn't seen was just so delightful. I mean, it was like, all right, well, I've seen all of the Blockbuster Video VHS tapes of the original series, but there's apparently this animated series. This is long before the Internet gave us immediate, effortless access to anything without any cost, except to possibly your FBI record if you're downloading illegally. And there was a charm that never really had me see this critically. I was just thrilled that there were these crazy whacked-out adventures that Kirk and crew went on. And so this podcast, in part, is me not sobering up, but achieving a mature viewpoint on, all right, so what is actually going on in this stuff that I love? And I'm totally open to hearing all criticisms, everything from the fact that Uhura's eyes are painted the same as her skin. I was just like, what? No, that's not how people are.
Almost everyone's like that. In the show. In the show.
Okay, thank you. Yes, no, everybody is like that in the show. For a second there, I thought we had your kind of blithe, dry wit crop up for a second. This is actually how people are, Louis. You've just been wrong your entire life.
Andorians have blue eyes. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not even necessarily complaining. Just making light of something I love because it's it's another way of appreciating it. It's a slightly different angle than I might have come at when I was younger. But did you all see or have any similar concerns or recognitions in dealing with this episode?
Well, I guess I'll jump in just really quickly. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious this is, again, done on the cheap, and that, again, there's just a couple of animation sequences for Lucian, and I guess you get more range with the main characters because again, we see them over multiple episodes. But despite these shortcomings of the budgetary restraints, I mean, I think that many of the stories that were part of the animated series were ones that were originally being mooted for a next season of the live action series. So the stories in many cases are pretty good stories. I mean, I think that if they've had to cut them down to fit the half hour time slots, they're perhaps not as developed as they could have been with more time. But there are some pretty good stories, and the animation allows them to tell stories they might not have told. I mean, if I recall correctly, there's like an episode where we meet Spock's dog or something, and we're the one they had as a child. And, they couldn't have done that, I mean, as convincingly, I guess they would have been like, they could have taken a real dog and dressed it up, and that would have been like, I don't know, the Horda or something, So I mean, they're able to tell better or different stories more easily because of the format. So that's, I mean, I have fond memories of the animated series, so I'm team animated series.
Respect. How about you, Futrell?
Yeah, once I got into it, I was able to analyze this, but I feel like there's always a filter of like, this is 1970s animation. And I don't think the 1970s were really a high point for the art of animation. But there's part of the fun.
There's this phenomena that I wanted to point to. Sorry to interrupt, but like the use of music. In the original series, I didn't notice this as much as in the animated series, but they reused the music over and over. Like these songs that they have to show you that the action is intensifying. And for some reason, it really works here. Like, I don't mind at all. I'm actually entertained and engaged and thankful and involved. Like it's kind of the Star Trek action music. So, yeah. Right. But anyway.
Yeah, it's a real shame they couldn't license the true Star Trek music for the beginning, but so it goes.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've seen like these episodes so many times that it all kind of blurs together, but it does seem to me that in the original series that there's musical cues that get used over and again as well. So I think it's kind of the nature of program music, and also just having music for certain types of moods. But certainly what they have in the animated series are much shorter pieces, and when you hear them repeated, it does. You recognize it. Oh, it's this again.
So Tyler, I've got a very unique question for you. I'm not sure, beyond your DJing work, how much you've done in voice acting, but how would you say the voice acting was on this episode?
For most of the actors and actresses, it was practically indistinguishable from seeing them in real life play the parts. I got to say that it was pretty solid all around. So, George Takei, Louis Takei.
It's Takei, not Takai, like you've been saying for 40 years.
Good job, Bill. Anyway, George Takei playing.
What is it? Yeah, go ahead.
Portraying the initial Megan, like over voice, kind of had me giggling in my seat for a while. I had to snap out of it and get back to, analysis mode just to break myself free. But yeah, that's pretty much the only thing that took me out of it. Everyone else did a great job all around. James Doohan's great. And that's pretty much all I got.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. From our in-house professional actor, we have an affirmation of the goodness of the acting of the episode. Oh, well. So, yeah, I think it feels like the right time to lean towards the ratings, and in a rare but bold move. Tyler, let's start with you.
Well, I think if I were to give it a color, it would be brown, because it was very colorful, and pretty much every color all melded together makes a brownish consistency. So, yeah, that's what I got. What do you have?
Well, as usual, your rating scale is completely incomprehensible and fascinating. Let me just ask, is brown good? Are you going to deny us the satisfaction of having a coherent understanding?
Brown is brown. I think our listeners can interpret that the way they want to, you know.
All right. Well, coming back to the world of normal people ratings. No, Tyler, you're great. That's why we have you around in large part. I think I give this.
I don't like normal.
Respect for all of that. I think this episode for me had something close to 8.5. I mean, like, it isn't the philosophical gem that Measure of a Man is. There is some interesting stuff going on in it, and I take back a point I take back 0.25, I'd say, just because it's animated, like, and the nature of that whole canon is either confusing or in doubt for me. So not discounting it for that, just like, all right, well, it's not as fully fledged or worked out an episode as we see with other series, and maybe that's a judgment on the medium. Okay, I'll push it all the way up to 8.75, a solid B, maybe even a B+. All right, Mr. Futrell?
I'm going to give it a 9.
Yeah?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. There were a lot of fun ideas. And I'm adjusting for the animation factor. I'm not sure what it would be, including the animation factor. That's going to be a solid 9.
Cool. Well, Doc, it's all up to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to give it a 93 because that's Crowley's favorite number. But for me, it pushes all the right buttons. You know, it's all the things I love. It's Star Trek, and it's got magic in it. I mean, what's not to like? The thing I think I've resolved to do as a result of this podcast, though, is tracking down Alan Dean Foster's adaptation of the episode. Let's see, if that missing scene we mentioned earlier is in fact in there.
Yeah, I rather like imagining Kirk and Spock, doing Resh or the the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or God forbid that lengthy Liber Reguli. Man, I can't believe I used to do that. It takes so long.
Spinning around and gesticulating, yeah.
Yeah, initial tests and evoking elements and such. Well, to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. Please definitely like or dislike. We welcome controversy, which might actually sound arrogant, assuming that somebody not liking this is controversial. I believe we've taken our first steps into the bold world of horrific media here. So like, dislike, comment, feel free to subscribe. And if you'd like to learn more about the good Doc, you would probably want to spell your last name for the website. It's Richard. It's www.richard. Or dash? Is it dash?
Dash.
And CAC.
Or KAC. Yeah. So it's Richard KACZYNSKI.com.
This is the part where Richard Futrell, if he weren't less formal and polite and gentlemanly, would probably make some sort of a Unabomber joke. But I'll just leave that to our imaginations.
We'll leave that.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you so much, Doc, for being on. We have really enjoyed you. You're certainly welcome back for, Star Trek 6 or Cat's Paw or whatever you'd like to talk about. I'll look for suggestions from you if you're interested.
Oh, definitely. And it was a pleasure doing this. And I'd enjoy doing it again.
Awesome. All right. Well, Mr. Futrell, Tyler, thank you guys.
It was a pleasure.
Bye, all.
Okay, thanks.
And in the words of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, don't let them touch you.